you so much for joining us today. My name is Leah Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the Berkeley Risk and Security Lab, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you here today for this first panel on inspiring innovation and experimentation in governments. This is one of 2 panels that'll be happening during this slot, so if you have time, I also recommend that you stick around so that you can hear from the next panel, which is going to be what's happening with federal data and what you can do about it. For this one, focused on how federal and state government agencies have extraordinary capacity to deliver impactful services when steered by determined and agile leaders, we have 3 members of the Executive Fellowship in Applied Technology Policy, which is a fellowship hosted by the Goldman School for Public Policy and the School of Information. The 3 Executive Fellows, Marcela Escobar-Alava, Merici Vinton, and Vera Zakem, will discuss their experiences driving innovative change within large bureaucracies and ensuring responsible development of digital services and their adaptation by people across California and the broader United States. I want to make a quick note that we will be making a recording of the panelists for their records and internal use. That's happening over here. And with that, I will hand it over to the moderator, Vera Zakem. And once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
So, thank you all so much for coming. I am just super honored and thrilled to be here today, especially with my 2 amazing executive fellows in tech policies. The 3 of us had the honor of serving in the Biden-Harris administration. We've done, obviously these women both done a lot of amazing things throughout their illustrious career, which I hope you will give us some insights on some of the things that you're doing. And we were really, really grateful that we are able to be part of UC Berkeley's inaugural cohort of executive fellows in applied technology policy, which is a joint program between the School of Information and the Goldman School of Public Policy. I'm going to just do brief intros in terms of the bios so you kind of get a sense of who folks are. I'll tell you about me very last. So Marcela on my left. Marcela served in the Biden-Harris administration, holding several senior level positions, including Deputy Director for the White House Information Technology, Special Assistant to the President, and the Chief Enterprise Applications for the Office of Administration as a Deputy Commissioner and Chief Information Officer for Social Security Administration. And prior to her federal service, she has held several CIO positions in the private and nonprofit sectors, including Sony Pictures, and other amazing work that you've done. Marcela, oh my God, this is Marcela Merici, who is just has an amazing career in federal government, and has led a number of incredible initiatives. She has served as a senior advisor to the IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel, and while at U.S. Digital Service and in partnership with IRS, Merici spearheaded the launch of IRS's new free and beloved tax file service, Direct File. I'm hoping some of you use that as well. In addition, Merici was one of the first employees in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and developed tech strategy for the agency, steering it towards one of the openness from day one. And then myself, I'm former Chief Digital Democracy and Rights Officer at the U.S. Agency for National Development, where I led a lot of efforts on public interest technology, AI, and technology and democracy and service for people and societies where we serve all over the world. And currently, I decided to come to California, where I am the State Chief Technology Innovation Officer for the state of California, where one of the things that I am doing is I get to lead on digital service delivery and emerging technologies and elevating intentional partnerships, fundamentally really serving the people, the 40 million people that live here in California. So maybe I'll just start off, Marcela, turn to you. If you could just share a little bit about what you did at SSA, maybe some of the lessons learned, and then some of the things that you've been doing through this fellowship as well as you've been kind of recounting your experience. One of the things I just mentioned about this fellowship that we've been part of is really, if you will, documenting some of the work and some of the experiences that we had in the federal government and where it can be applicable to not just California, but to a number of communities. So just maybe turn it over to you first.
So yeah, I started off in the federal government. This is my first round. I don't know if it's maybe weird like thing. I think it's this thing. It's But I had worked my entire career in the private sector, mostly a nonprofit a little bit, and joined up with a team, this one, all right, that was looking, the Tech Talent Project, that was looking for people in the private sector to do a tour of duty. And so they kind of prepped you in this boot camp sort of way. What was it like to do procurement, career staff, political staff, all sorts of different things. And so I felt pretty well equipped, did my first stint in the White House, and that's really where I was partnered with someone who had been there during the Obama administration, so he knew the ropes. And one of the biggest things he said was, you know, you are a political appointee, you know, everyone on the team will do whatever they need to do based on what you direct them, so be very careful with your words. So stepping into the SSA, it was one of the biggest jobs that I've ever led and taken in my entire life. And so I felt very privileged to have the opportunity to step into an organization that was directly servicing the public. At the White House, I always said I help the people that help the people of the United States, but at the SSA I had direct impact. And so stepping in, you know, I had 2 deputy CIOs, and I had about 13 different people that oversaw. One was Chief Information Officer, or Chief Information Security Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and then I had a lot of different leaders that oversaw disability systems, benefit systems, enterprise systems, and so it was a pretty big team. And so I figured, okay, this group is really applying best practices. They have their act together. And you know, I started off asking a bunch of questions, like, what is our strategy? Well, we don't have one. Well, how much legacy do we have and how are we managing? Well, we don't have a plan to replace our legacy applications. What about the team? What's the makeup of the team? Oh, by the way, the average age is 55. We only hire executives and higher level people from within. And, excuse me? Oh, and they themselves call themselves insular, from a culture perspective, insular and inbred, where, you know, the White House pulls from people out of DC. SSA pulls most of their people out of Baltimore, Maryland, and so there's a lot of family relationships that grow up. But I think the biggest point there is, if you're really innovating, if you're really drawing, you know, best practices from what others have done really well, you need kind of that blend of talent at all levels to come in with some innovative ideas. And so I quickly realized within the first 15 days that there was a lot more structural issues within the SSA versus just proceeding with like an AI innovation, for example. It was, a lot of it was just back to basics. So my fellowship paper is really focused on leadership, organizational design, culture, and also partnering with others. Like, you really should have a head of the agency that's very supportive, you know, of these initiatives. The commissioner at the time, he was very much focused on addressing overpayments, underpayments, the disability processing time, and then really dealing with the 1-800 number in the call center. And so when you started to evaluate, like, how are we to be able to really address, for example, call center wait times, you look at what you have in place and you realize that you have a very old infrastructure from a telephone system. It doesn't really manage calls the way it should. There's little to no integration with other systems. So when you think about like how someone processes information, the technicians have to basically navigate 70 different systems to update your address, or if you got married, or if you moved. You know, there's a lot of like specific data points that really impact your disability payments and your benefits payments. So a lot of these structural issues, I said, how am I going to really tackle this? There had been advisors on the outside that had just said, look, you really need to have a customer-oriented perspective, a customer-first approach. You need to change the operating model. And so coming in, you know, the team had kind of read those things but never really acted on anything. The organization grew up as a paper-based systems, and all of the systems that were built over the years were all based on kind of siloed, standalone processes. So my biggest push at the SSA was really to introduce a new operating model, which was the product operating model. I had all of my leadership and people that were involved, stakeholders, had a lot of shadow IT leaders, so there was a lot of things that were being built outside, read the book by Marty Kagan called Transformed. So if you haven't read that book, I would suggest that you read it. But it basically, when I read it, I was like, this is SSA, right? Everything we do is project-based. Everything we do is in a siloed mentality. When I asked the team, how do you engage with your customers? How do you engage with the public? They told me flat out, we're not allowed to talk to our customers. So over the last 4 to 5 years, they've built systems without that customer input, without the user research, without data to really drive what things they were doing. So I kicked into a organizational change mentality to really start to educate the leadership on what it meant to actually move towards a product operating model. So the phone system was one where we quickly pulled together a quad. We called them quad, and in the book it's more of a 3-person model where you have a lead engineer, a lead designer, and a product manager. But we felt that it was important to really have the business voice in that leadership team, that product leadership team. So we pulled in just a subject matter expert that was an expert in, for example, the 311 for like cities and states. We brought her into the SSA, who helped us also assess what the people need on the phone, right, in terms of training and upskilling and things like that. So she became part of that team. And so we assessed solutions. We looked at AWS Connect. That's something that could handle the volumes at SSA and could actually be scalable. You can actually build all sorts of other things on top of that, which again, I saw that as an opportunity to rationalize my portfolio and start getting rid of a bunch of one-off things that had been created. So we were able to implement that in 45 days, which was completely unheard of in the federal government. And now the current administration can continue to build things onto that platform and tap into other things behind the scenes. So it's just one of the examples.
So this is fascinating in the sense that I think we talk a lot about that when we're dealing with technology and delivering services for people, it's less about the technology itself, right? But so much about people and processes and change management. And I think what you've just shared with us is so much about that, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So, Merici, over to you. So you really help build, launch, and do everything in between, I should say, for Direct File. So tell us what made Direct File particularly successful.
Ooh, I love that question. So I'll take a step back and I'll talk a little bit about Direct File. So Direct File was a free online tax filing service provided by the IRS. It was available for 2 filing seasons, and during those filing seasons, it increased trust in the IRS. Users reported that it increased their trust in the IRS by 86%. It had net promoter scores higher than other tax software and rivaled Starbucks and Apple. It had user satisfaction ratings in the 90s, 96%, which is higher than Netflix's. And fundamentally demonstrated that actually government can deliver and it can deliver well and people want it. So that's kind of the quick summary of Direct File. So how we did that and why it was successful, first and foremost, we designed with taxpayers. So what that meant, we designed for trust. So what that meant was that we talked to up to 400, although I've heard 195, so I'm gonna get the right number one of these days, taxpayers from day 0. Before there was a multi-year process to get Direct File, even like a decision made on whether or not to do it. But even when we were in the policy process in the White House, we were we were discreetly talking to friends and family to give us feedback on these ideas. So even from day 0, we brought users into the product. And I think that fundamentally that user experience is what made it so successful and increased trust. Every screen, every decision that we made. We designed for all different abilities. So accessibility was built in, not just as an afterthought, but as how we did the work. And that was really important as a government service to be accessible, obviously, but also it meant that anybody could use it, which was really great. We had a lot of great partnerships. I think those are kind of the big ones. And a bit of the how. So we built an in-house team of people to launch this. We also had vendor teams, but it was really important that the government owned the IP. That was actually a decision that had to be, I don't know if had to, that was a decision we chose to make during the policy process, was whether or not this should be owned by the government or not, which I think is weird. I think the answer is yes, it's tax filing software. That IP just shouldn't be owned by the vendors, and by vendors I mean like contractors, not other tax filing software companies. I'm talking, like the big Accenture, Deloitte, whoever works for whatever agencies. So it was really important that we owned it, that we had our heads around the work that we were doing, and that team, and we had amazing vendors as well. And so that team is what delivered it. We prototyped early and often. So there's kind of a lot of different lessons that I can talk about way more, but I think fundamentally it was the user experience is what made it most successful.
If I could just follow up with you on that, in terms of the user experience, it was interesting what you said, and I think this is something even also that resonates for me now being a senior official in California government, and that is, how you have to test and experiment and think about the users, right, and the citizens and the residents in order to build trust. So you talked about that on the front end and building all of those from diversity, equity, inclusion, and for different abilities on the front end. And did you do any kind of testing or experimentation or that feedback loop on the back end to see how residents were, if you will, benefiting from direct file? What was their experience in order to actually go back and improve the product?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, early on, we didn't even define what we were talking about. One of our biggest supporters in the White House was really excited, I'm not joking, that we were going to make an online PDF. And that was what she was super stoked about for 2022, 1. And so the first thing is we had to bring that to life to people. We had to show, no, we're not just taking the 1040 and putting it online. We're actually going to ask people questions, and we're going to use the information that those individuals provide to the IRS to make the right recommendations. So that was a fundamental, that was also a policy decision that had to be made. Again, I think it's weird that we have to make these decisions, but we had to make that decision. So beyond that, the testing was critical. Our user research was critical. We used it all types, from discovery, really going broad. One example, so direct file, we started very small with both the number of states that we could use and also the tax situations that we can support. Taxes are complicated, and certain people, individuals with, lots of houses or lots of investments, it gets very complicated. And so we had to define a tax scope for the product. And we put a screener in front of direct file that basically let you decide whether or not you wanted to enter. Our first screener we did in partnership with a lot of lawyers at the IRS. Users hated it. Absolutely had a visceral reaction and said, I won't use this product because I won't even use your quiz that you designed to be easy. If that's easy, this product is going to suck. More or less is what they said. And so we pivoted our entire strategy for that screener based on that feedback. And thank goodness we did, because it would have lost trust. It would have been too complicated. Typical government, don't know what they're doing, don't know how to talk, don't know how to design. And so that was a really important example. You asked about feedback loops. So obviously it was built in, constantly built in. I've got 2 quick stories. One story is we saw the research approach that a vendor was going to do for building direct file. And their proposal to the IRS was, all right, so we're gonna start building this in let's say February of a year. So we're gonna build it, And then in October, so February and October, in October, that's when we're gonna go put it in front of users. And then we're gonna launch it in January. And that is like, that thinking, I don't know what you all do in here, but that thinking is the wrong thinking. Because user research is critical for pivoting your strategy. Like, for tearing something up altogether and say, okay, that was wrong. We need to do this instead. And so that product would have not been super successful, is my guess. So that's one story. And the other story that isn't told a lot in the direct trial story, but I think is really important, is we had the customer support agents, so IRS agents, sitting next to the product team. And so our frontline employees were able to tell us problems or questions that people encountered in real time, and we could update or fix the product to make it better. So we did a lot of real time. There were like over 2,000 updates made to the direct file product during the first filing season, because based on user feedback or data that we saw.
That's actually fascinating. I kind of feel like so many more products and so many things out there these days. I wish they had that kind of a like instant, if you will, right, feedback loop. Marcela, I want to go back to you. You know, when we think about serving the public and what government can do in terms of technology and innovation, experimentation, and delivering for the people, you know, I think about there's policies, there's procedures, there's procurement, various processes, you know, the tech itself. What did you find as the CIO that you really had to invest in of those, maybe it's all of them or some of them, to really try to achieve the goals and objectives that you set forward?
So I think again, the issue with SSA was you couldn't just go there without doing some of the basic legwork. So it was policies and procedures, like are you following ITIL, right, when you're doing things? Looking at the architecture and your portfolio, do we even have a list of all of our applications that we're using? No, we've never gathered one. So how do you even know what you need to fix or integrate or innovate or address if you don't even know where you're starting from? The other part was, how do all of these applications and systems integrate with one another? We don't know. The last time we did a full like architecture map was 2017. What are we doing in terms of recruitment, talent, retention, motivating, rewarding, incentivizing? Well, we kind of follow the standards, but how are we aligning the standard review process cycles? Like, how do you even know that the team is actually achieving their objectives? Well, we don't measure those kinds of things. And procurement, I had an IT finance team of about 100 people, none of which had a finance background. So how do I know what my cost benefit is for these projects? How do I know that we're realizing the benefits? Well, we're aligning to what OMB wants to hear. And so there was just so many things that needed to be addressed. I don't know that there was one single thing, because I felt it as an imperative for me to start like back to basics, having the right leader that had an IT finance background. The infrastructure team, they had a service desk, a help desk, but then 9 other departments in SSA also had service desks. So how do you really understand the application health of your portfolio if you have your data scattered all over the place? So not to mention the redundant costs of multiple systems to store incidents, and the team of people that needed to resolve those things, right? And that's just how the SSA had grown up. And so it was a little bit of a major overhaul and putting some of the key leadership in the right places, hiring the right people from the outside. I think I mentioned the inbred comment, but SSA had the IT team had a policy that they would not hire anyone above a GS-14 from the outside. Everyone needed to be moved from within and promoted from within. And so at the leadership level, you don't get any of that outside thinking. And so changing that, establishing the job descriptions to be able to get the right talent. When they would publish job descriptions to hire people, it would just be an IT specialist. Let's see who we get. And oh, by the way, you're a Java programmer, but let's stick you over here with the COBOL team because you can figure it out. No, you can't. So let's be specific. Do we need COBOL programmers? Are we going to hire them, or are we going to contract them out? Let's contract them out, because if we want to replace our COBOL systems in the next 5 to 6 years, because it's not something that can happen overnight, then let's plan ahead. Let's establish the strategy. So there was a lot of like reestablishing things, plus also then changing the mindset and the culture to say we can experiment, we can still continue to do some of these innovative things. Yes, we're going to hire a chief AI officer, we are going to hire a chief data officer, and we're going to make sure that we have these people in place to start building out what that outlook should be. And these people need to be career people, because you need these people to stick around when the leadership and the administration changes. And so that's what I put in motion. Some of those things were taken apart, but there's other things like the product operating model that has gotten a foothold within the agency. So I was able to stand up 2 product teams, very similar to what Merici was talking about, where you have to conduct that iterative user research and bring in all the right multidisciplinary individuals together to build the right products for the people. You can't just do it overnight. Everybody at the agency all of a sudden becomes product-based. You kind of can't do that. You have to like do it. So I was able to accomplish 2 of them. The current CIO has 20, and so now we have 20 individual product teams that are actually building these services for the public. And it will take some time, I think, for the benefits of this shift in way of working is going to actually play out for the public. And I know right now there's a lot of like angst and issues with how the government is working, but there's these foundational things that will eventually pay off.
No, what's fast one is, for those of you who don't know, so GS-14 and GS-15 in the federal government, those are your senior level, if you will, career leaders and also senior executive service. So Marcela, what you're saying is that those are only promoted from?
Not after a month of being there.
Okay.
After
Not
a month
after
of
a month
being
of
there.
Marcela.
Month of Marcela, that's gone out the door.
There you go. But traditionally, before you?
Yes, for the prior 4 years. For the prior 4 years, that's how the executive officer and the CIO managed the team, because they wanted to have a very loyal, I don't know about loyal, but that was part of what they defined as having good culture, and what is that going to do to the morale of the people. And I said, are we actually delivering services? Have you spoken to the customers? One of the, again, very rudimentary things I did was I instituted what I called field trips. So I was able to get over 200 people in the IT shop to actually sit down, sit with someone answering the phones and dealing with people in the public to, like, we cannot allow the technicians and the frontline workers have to navigate 60 to 70 different systems to input information. Like, if I am a technician, I will want to leave the SSA in a minute because IT doesn't care. Look at what we are doing. So putting your people with your customers is extremely important. And again, it was like, oh, we're not allowed to talk to the field. Who says we're not allowed to? I want to talk to that person. So within, again, a month, I was able to establish a way where we mutually agreed, okay, we're not going to disrupt operations in the field, but we are going to give the people that are building this software and these systems for you firsthand knowledge of what the public actually needs, but they need to be able to sit with you and understand what these challenges are, right? We were so far removed from being able to get feedback early and often and throughout any single product at the SSA, and the applications and the services that we provide to the people show. You all can see it, your families can see it, the American people can see it. We need to have the people that are building these solutions also see it.
And that becomes key, which I'm sure we can follow up with questions. Let me ask, over to you again. Let me ask this question to you. If you had to go back and do it all over again, but if you had to go back and do it all over again, knowing what you know now, what everything that you had to do to build Direct File, what would you do differently? And maybe there are some things you might do similar.
Yeah, so actually I don't know if the answer is about Direct File. you have to forgive me, my years are all blurring together in this period, but in 2022, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a significant investment in the IRS. It was a needed investment and an upgrade in the entire organization. What I wish I would have done, and yeah, I would say it was a good idea, but it wasn't. I think we had to get direct file. We had to prove that something was possible in order to gain the confidence and the trust that this idea would have been a good idea. I wish that we would have hired 200 technologists to come in and to really make sure that that 80 billion, which then became 60 billion, which I think is now $0 investment, was being spent in a way that upgraded the agency. And a lot of the money was spent in incredible ways to make it easier for people to do certain things in their online accounts. A lot of it was spent in the right ways, but it fundamentally didn't transform the how, in my opinion. And the how, so for example, it was still an incredibly siloed organization. I'll assume you all live in California and maybe you interact with modern tools and technology, or you have a laptop that works. And if you walked into the halls of the IRS, none of that was accessible to you. And people didn't have laptops that worked. And our CIO wasn't fully aware of that, who I have a lot of time for, but it wasn't how he took his job. And because there's so much going on, it's not about that person, it's just about thinking about technology and digital as a tool to change not just what we put out the front door, but how the organization works. And I think the opportunity was pretty missed. That's what I would do differently. Sorry for not a direct file question.
Still, but it's an important question.
Well, I mean, to tie to direct file is that then you would, our whole theory of change with direct file is that if you have a strong core of a team, of a way of working the product operating model, you can radiate that out and try to change or affect the rest of the organization. That also didn't happen because we had.
Over to you. Same question.
I don't know. I think I've been thinking about this as much as possible, as a lot. I've been reflecting what could I have done differently, and again, I worked pretty fast as it was, but I think not. Maybe, and it is a weird one, but maybe not being as nice. I'm known for being nice and demanding, so I think the demanding part in the firm is fine. But I was also treading lightly. I did not want to be a bull in a china shop. Right, and so I wanted to respect the career staff that was there, which was quite a few. Many people had given up their life for public service and had been there for 20, 30 years, and so I worked with them, around them, coaching the shadow IT team. I had an approach of let's embrace the shadow IT, right? Let's bring them in the fold versus them kind of scattering away and kind of hiding what they were doing. I wanted really all of that to surface. But maybe if I was a little bit more, let's use the power of the commissioner to really address certain mandates and things that I wanted to get done. For things where I saw that people would start to retreat or be careful of, especially on the product model. We wanted to bring these multidisciplinary teams together, and doing an official restructure required HR to redo I can't remember what they call these codes, right? Then we ran out of codes because they had done so many reworks that they couldn't get me more code, so they couldn't do my rework. So I would have, I think I would have just pushed forward. Current administration, again, maybe some lessons learned, is that they just cleared out a floor and they said, you all are product teams, and I don't know how they're getting through their official restructuring, but just again, maybe being a little bit more firm and assertive on some of these organizational changes that really would have forced people to work together and disregarded some of the hierarchies. So again, people are like, no, why are you going to break up my team of 400? We've been together for 20, 30 years. It's what you're doing is not working, right? Let's break you up into these small teams and just do it, and it's done. And if you want to cry, come talk to me later. But I think I'd probably would have dropped the niceness.
I mean, definitely my Roman Empire, which I think is a phrase that makes sense in the sentence, is the whole train of thought that, like, I just think we're in a moment, a crisis of legitimacy as government, and we still have to do things like submit a 2-year request to change the organizational chart for a small team over here, and it, like, that actually does nothing for people, and that does not make what I feel is a legitimacy crisis go away or get any better. And I have no time for the excuses anymore. Like, if we can't come together in multidisciplinary teams or whatever if we can't come together to solve a problem, we shouldn't have jobs. Like, that is where I'm at. And I think it is a huge crisis of legitimacy, beyond trust, that we have to sit in our silos and stick with the way it was and not actually deliver. So yeah, I can completely agree.
Super valid. I'm going to ask one last question that is really important, and then we're going to open it up to other questions. Speaking of legitimacy, speaking of trust, there's one final question that I have, because I always think about, and it's been sort of a cornerstone of my work, whether I've been on the foreign policy side, policy, tech policy, whatever. But you know, when you're building technology solutions, and you're developing tech policy in service of the people and in service of society and communities, people need to really understand what you're doing, and you know, and so the communication of this, really understanding, you know, like telling the story on the communication side, it also becomes equally important sometimes as much as the actual building the product and doing the good work. And I'm not just talking about, hey, let's put out a press release. I'm talking about, I mean, I think you both kind of talked a little bit about kind of human-centered design and co-designing things and building those products with people, which I think is a critical piece. But are there any lessons learned on the comms side, or just, I would just say, think of it like telling the story better about technology delivering services to the people that you might want to share?
Yeah, one of the things that one of my colleagues, she headed up the Office of Transformation, and so her team had started working on this thing called the Service Index, which basically maps out all of the different services that SSA provides to the public in the different service channels: online, on the phone, and walk-in. And so for each of those services, there's 140 different services that SSA provides to the public, right? You change your address, you get married, right? You move, and so on. You have kids, you have a disability, right? So that it goes on for 140 different things. Within each of the service channels, we only are able to conduct a transaction of 25% of those services in either channel. So sometimes the customer gets bounced around, right? They're like, oh, you gotta go in, oh, you gotta call online, oh, you gotta do this online, right? And so there's lots of confusions. So in the spirit of transparency and trust to the American public, everyone should know, here's the 140 things that we do for you as a service. Here's what you can get these kinds of services addressed online, this is what you can do on the phone, and this is what you can do if you walk in. Oh, and by the way, we are going to start checking off, because we're automating some of these other things. So here's our plan for the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, that we can start saying, okay, in the next 3 to 6 months, you'll be able to change your address online. You'll be able to give us this, right? And make that a open to the public. Look, we don't have all of these services available to you everywhere, but here's our commitment to you, the public, that we are going to start checking this off. So number one, it becomes very clear to you what you can do and where, and what we're working on. I think that's what I would do in terms of comms.
I have a love-hate relationship with this question, because, so we'll go to the bit that was fun. So the IRS comms team, we had so much fun doing drug trial, and I feel so lucky that, you know, we actually found, they were a lot of fun. And so, for example, our first ever tax filer. So direct trial, we did it phased, very risk aware. rollout. So we had one user, and then we had like a handful of users, and then we had a couple of other handful of users. And then we were very risk conscious. We did not want another FAFSA or healthcare.gov disaster to deal with. And we didn't want to lose our trust. So our first ever user, it didn't work. Like she hit submit. She didn't know it didn't work, but everyone starts crying, and they're like, "You were the first." She consented to this, to everyone watching her file their taxes, and not everyone, but so like everyone's crying and they're happy, and then you hear, "Oh, sorry, Dan. Oh shit." And our engineers are just furiously like trying to figure out what happened. It didn't submit. And so we fixed it, yay. Had that been the launch, direct file would be over, GovTech would be over again, further crisis of legitimacy. So anyway, the first ever lady, Dixie Warden, single mother, Austin, Texas, IRS employee, 3 kids, and paid $400 every other year for her tax filing. She consented to doing an interview with the media. So that was a super fun story. So the AP went down, took photos of her. So we really tried to connect the service to the individual. And we were very lucky with our media. The Atlantic did a story, and I was talking about our screener. So there was a certain moment on the screener that, anyway, the guy found out that he couldn't use it, but he had to use our live chat, our agents, to figure that out, and he had the best experience. So we were really lucky with our media. That was luck. Like had he tried to ask those questions like a week or 2 earlier, they probably wouldn't have been trained on that. So we had a lot of fun. They let us be very, very open with our comms. But what drives me nuts about this question is I actually think that that comms are, because of the disintermediated nature of government and how we deliver, communications are necessary. And I don't actually want a government talking to me unless it's like, hey, it's time to renew your passport, or hey, you need to file your taxes. Like, it's a useful nudge. I don't actually want to hear from government, but we are in this situation because it's like, we don't have services. The service is pay my taxes. The service in California is get my driver's license. We don't have services that, we don't think in that way, nor do we often have services. And so we have to do comms. And that is my other, I apparently have a lot of Roman empires. But I think that when you do communicate and you do have these services, it's transparent, it's government being confident about what it can deliver, it's not defensive. And I think that's all really important versus like weird government speak.
Okay, awesome. On that note, we'd love to take some questions if anyone has any. And I see several hands. Fantastic.
Hello, thank you for your time. I think my question is kind of connected to what you just talked about with communications. And I'm wondering, what do you see for the future of information and data literacy? As we have more technology, more data, more reports, do we see reports becoming more user-friendly? Do we see users becoming more tech-friendly? Do we see users relying on specialists who hold the knowledge? And who should be in charge of regulating this and making sure we're where we need to be to understand what we need to understand?
I'll start and then maybe one, 2 punch. Okay. I'm going to answer part of it. Okay.
I don't need to answer.
So first of all, I think literacy and kind of, if you will, information, let's just call it like information literacy about technology, it's so critically important because one is, this stuff is moving so fast, and I think it's important for us in government to stay up to speed on everything that's happening. It is also important on, for the citizens, for the consumers, also to stay up to speed on what's happening. And also, let's just also be honest, know in terms of like critical thinking skills, where to actually get, where to get accurate and reliable, dare I say, information. So I think, and this is an area I actually led at USAND, so I'm a little passionate about that one. But like the idea here is that, I think that becomes important. It's a two-way street. It becomes one of those things that we need to continuously build trust. I mean, there's a lot of, as you know, I think governments and private sector, a lot of people are, investing in this space. But I think, again, I don't think necessarily just general investment is enough here. But I think also making sure that reliable information is getting out to people also becomes important. So it's multiple, if you will, street versus people that build technology, the governments that deliver services to the people, and the consumer of that information as well.
Yeah, I think consumers expect things to be simple and intuitive, and so when we're building solutions, we need to think about that, right? And not like bloat it with like legalese and all these things. Like when I see that, I just skip right over it. I don't read anything, right? I just would like to go to a UI that I can figure out myself, right, without having to get some help. And so I think the maturity of the consumer is there, right? They expect to be able to engage and interact with their software. They expect it to be like iterative behind the scenes, right? They're already expecting patches and new releases. And a lot of times, like even at the SSA, people are like, oh, we're gonna impact the users. It's like, we're making the product better, right? You have to continue to deploy these things. So I think there is a little bit of a leniency from the American people that are like, okay, we know you're fixing things, right? But we expect an improved user experience over time. This stuff should get better. And the reports and other things, transparency of information should be consistent, right? And it should be continued to be accessible by the American people.
So I also think if you're staying for the next panel, I should ask the same question to Denise. Sorry, Denise. So quickly, first and foremost, is .gov's prior to, this is prior knowledge, .gov domain was the thing that people trusted the most, and it was really important to users. I hope that that will still continue. I understand things are weird right now, but I hope that will continue in the future. Number one. Number two, in the UK, they had a couple of people that would look for dark patterns of their own services. So again, I mentioned services like pay my taxes or do whatever. They had a team that would look for the designed version that would be govuk.com or something, or govuk.uk, just to trick people, and they would go after those websites to have them taken down. So I think there are things, and sometimes the FTC would look at dark patterns in the States, but I do think that it's only going to get far more complicated. This is the beginning of the complication in terms of what we're looking at, so it's a great question.
Hi, thank you. I have some insights about a personal experience with the SSA, and it had fallen apart for Medicare. And it's a small thing, and if this is untoward, I'll just drop it. But the net is, I had an issue with my back. My doctor said, oh, you can use acupuncture, and Medicare will pay for that. So I call them up, conversation transferred from one to the next. No one really knew what they were doing. They said, oh no, you can't. So I spoke to someone else, oh yeah, we cover that, no problem. So I fill out, send in my receipt to get reimbursed. It's denied. So I call them back again. I said, no, I did exactly what you said. And they said, well, you need to submit it again. So I'm not happy to submit something again like that when it's the agency's issue. So I submitted again. It was denied again. The provider, the details aren't so important. But I finally just let it go. And these services would be very useful for me. And so my question is, what could I do as a consumer to move this forward and speak to someone who would say, oh, no problem here, do this and this.
I'm actually going to take that, because I am also passionate about this. Is it another Roman Empire? So oftentimes the questions, and people are not trained to have, as a user, I want to know with confidence that if I call this person, I'm going to get the same answer as if I call this person as if I call that person.
Yeah.
So what I would do, if I were you, is I'd go to your state legislature, whoever your people are, and I would ask for repeatable, repeatable standards to have customer service agents. And I know this is not the federal level; it's different. That's a whole other bag of worms. But to have, to have an SLA, effectively, I don't know what those words mean right now. Service level agreement within an organization that's, we will make sure that we're going to train our people to have the same answer every time in this repeatable manner. And you're not going to get to 100% on that, because as somebody who worked at the IRS, there's a shocking amount of information that operates in gray. But I think we should all aim, and also as a country, we can't scale if we can't get more black and white in certain things. And so I think that would be a good question, a good ask is repeatable.
I think that's great. The thing is,
I can
spend an hour on the phone to get through.
So
That's a different.
yeah, that's so there's a couple things there too, and if you think about how technology can help, each agent, it takes them 18 months to become proficient on the policies. Yeah, oh my God. And why are we here? Yes, why are we here? Okay, I've said this. A 60-year-old organization that grew up paper-based, all the systems are paper-based, no one really had that integrated vision. So there is the ability to leverage technology, AI, over the policy document. So number one is ensuring that all of the policies are actually accurate and they reflect what you want the customer to hear as a response. Policies change. There's regular policies that get published almost every day, and then there's emergency policies that get published every day. Those two data sets are not necessarily in the same system. And then there's other regulations and things like that. So the amount of knowledge that a human needs to learn to be able to answer a question consistently across the 30,000 people that are answering these questions at the SSA is not feasible. Technology can address that. So when I left, we were doing some piloting on leveraging AI over the policy data, they call it POMS, as well as aligning internally within the leadership to say, what should that data set contain? Should it contain the policies plus these legal regulations? Well, maybe, right? But depending on what your data set is, you might have gotten, or you will get different responses from that kind of agent over that kind of data set. So we have to be really careful, because once you start throwing the technology at it, you go from 0 to 60 very quickly, right? So we have to make sure that there's a lot of testing on that data and we're giving people the right responses. So being able to say, okay, am I training this model? Am I giving this model feedback? Is it giving you the right answer that you want to, not that you want to hear, right, about whether acupuncture is covered or not. That is a yes or no, right? Like, we should have that in the regulations, and therefore that answer should be consistent. However, it's important for that to be fully tested before it goes out.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I do have a question. So, Marcela, you, in your time in the administration, were thinking about programs, some of which were going to go completely online, correct? And then Merici, you developed this excellent direct file, but I assume the intention was not long-term for every American to be filing on that. So I'd just love to hear what was the intention behind the program, and more broadly, when we're thinking about digitizing government programs, how do we strategize around, is this a service that we would want to shift completely online or completely in this new vehicle long term, or is this just an additional option that we want to present to the public? How does that then inform the rollout, the communication, and the broader project developments?
Yeah. So that was actually a decision that was never made. Yeah. So it was a policy decision that was effectively, when do we stop? And there were several camps in that conversation around 100% of tax situations, down to, I don't know if down is the right word, down to kind of the VITA scope, which is the lower income kind of services that the IRS provides for people across the country. Me personally, I kind of landed in the middle, which is, you can cover a significant portion, but some use cases are just so unique and rare. The way that we made those decisions was to think about, first and foremost, supporting people with the lowest income. And so that was kind of how, we thought about that. And then also non-filers would have been cool. But anyway, there was no answer ever made. And I would say I doubt that a decision would have been made to do 100%. Even, in the UK where I lived for a while, it's not 100% of situations. If you have a certain type of income, you need to file. I forgot the rest of your question.
Essentially, would a decision, one way or another, or even in between, change how you did the rollout? So it was the lack of decision helpful in a way?
I don't think it would have changed how we would have done the rollout. The most important bit of the rollout was starting small. The most important bit was maybe it would have been great if we could have had a larger population in year one in terms of tax scope and more tax situations, but fundamentally that starting small was the most important thing for us. It would have been nice, eventually to say this is kind of the end, but we never got there. So it's hard to kind of think about how to have gone back and done that, but I think starting small was the right decision, and so it wouldn't have changed anything, I don't think.
And I think for the SSA, you have to understand your demographic, right? So not everyone's going to be online. So I think my point was ensuring that all of the services, 140, are available through either channel, phone, online, or walk-in, right? And making sure that your systems can support it regardless. I certainly do believe in a very digital strategy, digital first, but you have to also ensure that your customers, as the demographic starts to shift and as the digital literacy starts aging, you're gonna like I will automatically go online for everything I need. I will not walk into a bank, right? So those kinds of things. But we have mixed generations that are the public of the SSA. So some of the things that are being done right now, which is really pushing people online, like forcing people, so you can't get your disability check unless you file for direct deposit online. Okay, well, there's still people who expect to have a paper check, and right, they don't fully trust the financial institutions of doing digital transfers. So you have to make sure that you still provide all of those services to your public, and I think your public themselves over time will start demanding more and more services differently, and then you start de-investing, right, in what you do either in the public or your kiosks or your offices or whatever infrastructure you have, physical infrastructure, and you start investing more on the digital side, but you do that over time. You don't just shut off a service because you want to push things online.
And is that de-investing based on response?
Yes,
correct. Rather than data and projections?
Correct, but right now we have enough people doing walk-ins and doing transactions in person that you still have to have your team staffed. But behind the scenes on the IT side, in terms of investments, you can still simplify what those front office people use. You could still use AI and other things to answer those questions consistently, right? So you can still deploy things that will help deal with the queue and the physical aspects of what the SSA does in a much more expedited fashion, and then address the learning curve, address the consistency, and ensure that you still have those services for the American people.
It's an interesting one though, and like at the IRS, we always had to include a sentence that said also available on paper. And I think that's nuts. Like, I think, like, yeah, there is paper that's available, but it shouldn't be in every press release. And so I think you have a responsibility to be, to think about how you message that as well, to encourage people to go online, knowing that there are other options.
And then I'll just add, and we'll finish with this. I think the key piece to this is to make sure that you're thinking about digital equity, all of the citizens and residents, in order to build trust. Because there are folks, depending on the demographics, that are not online, nor do they want to be. And when we're living in a pretty diverse world and serving diverse communities, that also becomes important in how we actually engage and develop technology. So with that, please thank our esteemed panelists.